Hi, everyone. This is Mindy Egan. Welcome back. I have some card inspiration to share with you today, featuring an exclusive kit with Hero Arts and Joanne.com. These kits are available only at Joanne.com and they are released every first Thursday of the month. So I have some fun Halloween inspiration to share with you. Here's a quick look at the contents of the kit. I'm also going to be walking you through it to show you exactly what you'd be receiving. First, let's take a look at the 3x4 clear stamp set that you would receive. This is the Hero Greetings Halloween, and it has some really great Halloween icons and some sentiments on here like trick or treat, happy Halloween, you're wicked cool, and happy haunting. There's also these really fun Halloween icon dies. So there is a pumpkin, a bat, a spider web, a cauldron, and a black, well, I'm going to make it a black cat, but there is a cat die in there as well. Also have the purple ombre sequence mix. So this is great for just adding embellishments to your card or for turning your card projects into shaker cards. Next, we have some mini ink cubes. So this is in tangerine, grape juice, and intensified black. We have this really fun Halloween scene background cling. So a lot of great spooky images on here, and this is a red rubber stamp. Then we have some cardstock. So we have two of each of these colors. This is in pumpkin, amethyst, and black. And there are two of them that are cut to 5.5 by 8.5. So great for either using as card panels or for your card bases. So for my first card, I'm going to go very simple, starting with the cling background stamp that I placed in my Misty stamping tool. I'm going to put a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of a panel of amethyst cardstock that is cut to 4.25 by 5.5. I'm placing that over my stamp image and I'm going to close my stamping tool backwards. That way, my cardstock was placed perfectly over the background and now it is temporarily adhered to the bottom of my stamping tool. I'm going to take the grape juice ink and I'm going to ink up the entire background. Now, this is tone on tone stamping or monochromatic, I guess would be another way you could look at it too. One thing I really like about doing this is that if my background is really kind of busy, which this one is, doing tone on tone is really nice way to include the background but not have it take over the entire card or distract you at all from the sentiment. So I missed a little bit there on the edge. That's through no fault of the stamp. I believe that was just how I positioned it in my stamping tool. So that is perfectly fine because I am going to trim this down. I just cleaned off my stamp with my Hero Arts scrubber tool and then wiped it off with a cloth. Now I'm taking any type of rectangle die would work for this. I have the Hero Arts Infinity rectangles. And the reason I love using rectangle dies is I can trim out my background to a smaller size, but I am able to pick and choose what part of the background I want to have die cut out. If you don't have any rectangle dies, trimming it out with a paper trimmer would work perfectly too. Now I'm just stamping one of my sentiments in the intensified black ink onto white cardstock, and I'm going to trim this out with a circle die. I'm placing the die over my sentiment, holding it down with a low tack tape, and die cutting this with my Hero Arts compact cutter. So while I have my cutter out, I'm going to go ahead and die cut out this cat out of some black cardstock. And since the eyes do die cut out, I thought it would be really fun to make them colored eyes. So I took some scrap green cardstock and trimmed it down into some really thin squares. And I added tape runner behind the face and then added those small green squares. So now it looks like I have this cool Halloween black cat with these bright green eyes. I'm taking my panel and adding some tape runner to that and attaching it to a card front that is 4.25 by 5.5 out of the black cardstock. And then I added some foam squares behind my sentiment, placed that down in the corner. And then I added a couple small foam squares just to the right side of the black cat and attached that. And the reason I only put some foam squares on the right is because it's going to kind of overlap the sentiment a little bit. And another really fun thing to do is I added some highlights with a white gel pen. Next, I'm going to do some ink blending. So I'm using the 3 ink cubes included in the kit and a blending brush that I have in my stash. I'm starting at one end with the tangerine ink, and I went about a third of the way down. Then I came in with the grape juice about halfway through and blending into the orange. And then I'll finish it off on the other end with the black intensified ink. And this is going to be a pretty wet background. I want to do some heat embossing on top. So after I get this finished, I'm going to set it off on the side to dry. While I have my inks out and my blending tools, I'm going to go ahead and grab another piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And just using the purple ink that's on my brush, I'm going to lightly start in the center and blend some color on, working my way out to the side of the card. Off screen, I die cut some of those Halloween icons out of black cardstock. And once again, I'm going to do a little bit of paper pasting. So I added green eyes behind my cat again, just adding tape runner to the back and placing those green scraps behind the face. And then for the pumpkin, I'm using spicy mustard. So any color really, I'm sure we have tons of scraps in our drawers that we could use for this. So I did a yellow behind the pumpkin. I'm bringing my panel back into my stamping tool and I'm going to stamp the happy Halloween sentiment down on the bottom of the card, just stamping that with the intensified black ink. You could definitely use an acrylic block if that's what you have on hand. Now, for my icons, they're going to be gathered on the front of the card, but I want to add my highlights to them before I start layering them onto the front. So I'm just taking a white gel pen and adding some little lines with two little dots afterwards, kind of help make it look a little bit more dimensional. Now, something else that's really fun is I took my grape juice mini ink cube and I smeared it onto my glass surface, then added a couple drops of water, mixed it up with a paintbrush, and I'm going to lightly tap my paintbrush to add these purple flicks to the background. I'm going to let this dry for a minute and then I'm going to start putting my little scene together. So I have a tape runner behind my cauldron. I'm not pushing down just yet because I want to align everything first to make sure where it's going to go. Now I took the spider web, added some liquid glue to that. I'm adding foam squares to the bat. I'm also going to add some foam squares to the black cat and the pumpkin so that it creates a little dimension and depth from the cauldron. Off screen, I did decide to add some of the purple sequins mix around my arrangement, so you'll see that in the finished picture. Now I'm going to go back to that whole ink blended panel that I did. I did heat this with a heat tool to help speed up the drying process, and one way I like to check if it's dry is sprinkling on some white embossing powder. If it falls off of the cardstock, then it's dry and ready to go. If the embossing powder is kind of sticking to it, then I know that that background is still wet. I placed my background stamp in my stamping tool the same as before, lining up my background over that stamp and then closing this up so that my background is adhered or temporarily adhered to the bottom of my MISTI. I'm prepping that cardstock with an anti-static powder tool and then inking up that background with embossing ink. After I stamp this down, I will be sprinkling on the white embossing powder. Now, I could have done all this embossing first and do an embossed resist technique. The reason I love doing it this way is because then I'm really getting the true white embossing powder. Sometimes when I'm doing ink blending, I notice that it might change shade a little bit, not a lot, but this to me, it just really pops off of the background. So after I sprinkle that on, I can melt all that embossing powder with my heat tool. I'm going to create two windows on a piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 using a circle die. One's going to be up here in the top corner. The other one I'm going to do kind of kitty corner down in the bottom corner there. So I have these two windows to go over my blended panel. I'm going to add dimension to that window by lining the back of it with some foam tape. And then I'm going to remove the backing of the foam tape and place this over my background. This would also be really great to do to turn it into a shaker card and use some of that purple ombre sequence mix. I die cut some more of those Halloween icons and added those to the front of the card. And then I just have a sentiment here that I'm going to add some foam tape to on the left hand side and tape runner on the right and have it overhang that window a little bit. And then, of course, coming in with my finishing touch of adding in that white gel pen. Then that's going to finish off this card, and I'll bring the other two back in to show you the three cards I created with this kit that is exclusive to Joann.com, which I will have linked down below in the video description. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.